Hi there, I'm Jen, this is Remembered Reads, and this is going to be the mid-year Freakout book tag. The mid-year Freakout book tag I think was created by Chammy, whose channel used to be called Read Like Wildfire, but she has since long deleted this video. But the tag lives on. I was not tagged, probably because I always take forever to do the videos that I'm actually tagged in, but I don't think you have to be tagged to do this video because it's just an annual event. Questions. Question number 1 is the best book you've read so far this year, and the best book I've read so far this year is absolutely Thomas King's 77 Fragments of a Forgotten Ruin. It is a collection of 77 poems that have a mixture of social commentary and humor, and it's just a really fantastic balance of those things, as well as conversations with the audience in a very fourth wall breaking kind of way, where there are some poems where it's a single line that says, "Go back and read that again," or "Go back and read the last however many again," and things like that. It's just a fantastic book. I read it back in April during National Poetry Month, and I noticed that my library now has it on the recommended list for Indigenous History Month, which is this month here in Canada. And you don't just need to read this for some kind of reading challenge about poetry or demographics. It's just a fantastic book. So yeah, I think by far the best thing that I've read all year. Question number 2 is the best sequel that you read this year. And the best sequel that I read so far this year was Volume 4 of Riad Sattouf's The Arab of the Future. This is a series of graphic memoirs that basically travels through his childhood throughout the 80s and into the 90s. And it follows his family as they travel mostly between France and Syria, but it also follows his parents' relationship as it falls apart, and it's a very honest, I was going to say honest, but I think that's not completely true because the parents actually have different first names than his actual parents have, so maybe that's the wrong way to think about it, but it's a very unflinching portrait of a family. So I really enjoy this series. It's well worth picking up if you enjoy graphic memoirs. Number 3 is new release that you haven't read yet but you want to. And today, as I'm filming this, Volume 2 of Greg Rucka and Leandro Fernandez's The Old Guard has come out. The first one came out several years ago, and there's a Netflix adaptation of the first one that's coming out soon. Yeah, so I have not read it yet because it just came out today and I didn't follow it in the floppies or anything, but I am looking forward to reading that. Assuming it's similar to Volume 1, it's mostly an action book with some historical flashbacks involving immortal warriors, more or less. There's some subtlety and commentary to it, although not too much. It's mostly an action focus. Question number 4 is your most anticipated new release for the rest of the year. I haven't really been following new releases this year, but I will pick up the collected version of Cy Spurrier's run on the new Hellblazer, so I think that was originally due to come out this summer, but I think it's coming out in September or so now, so I guess it'll have to be that because I'm otherwise not really following new releases. Question number 5 is your biggest disappointment, and I hate to admit this because I always feel conflicted when I don't enjoy a memoir, but my biggest disappointment was Maya Kobabe's Genderqueer, which is a graphic memoir that I found incredibly frustrating, and as I read it I felt irritated and was having almost an internal argument with the author as I went through it, which I think is probably not a fair reaction to have for a memoir. And I ultimately ended up deleting the video where I talked about it, so I haven't talked about it in a video because I did feel so conflicted, because on the one hand you can't argue with somebody's life, but on the other hand I was so intensely irritated and I'd heard nothing but good things. So yeah, that was definitely disappointing. Question number 6 is your biggest surprise, and I think my biggest positive surprise was an e-arc that I read through NetGalley for a book called The Master Chocolatier. I don't have the name of the author and the artist, but I will note them all below. This is the first volume in a graphic novel series about a chocolatier in Brussels who's going out on his own, and his business may or may not be funded by organized crime, and it's just one of the most visually beautiful books I've seen. The illustrations of both close-up things like faces of chocolates are amazing. The larger scale pieces, like there's an image of him walking through the Grand Place in Brussels, and that's beautiful. It has the best depiction of movement in a sign language that I've ever seen, even compared to, say, the Fraction and Aya run on Hawkeye or A Silent Voice, anything like that. It's just really good. It is, without a doubt, the best looking book I've read in maybe years, and really entertaining. So that was a great surprise, because I only picked it up because I've been enjoying picking up arcs of various localizations that Europe Comics is doing, and that was just by far the best of them. Question number 7 is your favorite new author. All of my 5-star reads this year so far have all been from authors I had already read, but I am looking forward to picking up more from P. Djeli Clark. I've just read The Black God's Drums a couple of days ago. This is a alternate history, Civil War era New Orleans steampunk, and it's one of those tiny novellas that Tor puts out, and it was very entertaining. I have another one of his books out of the library right now, so I'll get to that soon. But yeah, in terms of authors that I'd never read before where I went, I want to read more, that. Question number 8 is newest fictional crush. Yeah, I don't have one. I will say, I went and reread volume 1 of The Old Guard, the book I talked about, looking forward to the one that's coming out today. And Fernandez draws everybody's faces in a really ugly way. But what's really funny to me is that there's a Netflix adaptation of that first volume that's coming out next month, and the entire cast of that film is incredibly attractive. So it's hilarious to me that these people were drawn quite ugly, and they're all cast very attractive. That isn't really an answer to the crush question, but that is the first thing I thought of. Question number 9 is your newest favorite character. And I'm not a big character reader, but I will say that there's a character in here who's a kind of classic steampunk character in that she's an airship captain and she has a very steampunk prosthetic leg and is running around womanizing. And I love that kind of character, even in its usual form, which is a British man, but in this one it's a Trinidadian woman, which is not a huge subversion when it still checks all the other boxes, but I was entertained. Question number 10 is a book that made you cry. And, the book that definitely made me cry was Svetlana Alexievich's Last Witnesses, which is an oral history of people who were children during the German occupation of the Soviet Union during the Second World War, and it's just heartbreaking. I mean, I read a lot of histories about war crimes, so I feel like in a lot of ways I'm very accustomed to that kind of horror and reading about that kind of horror, but this was just another level of incredibly sad. So yeah, there were definitely a couple of ones in there where I don't know how you could get through that without crying, because it's rough. Yeah, unbelievable. Question number 11 is a book that made you happy. And I listened to the audio version of Samantha Irby's Wow, No Thank You. I think right the first week that it came out, I surprisingly got that out of the library immediately. And I listened to that while I was pulling weeds in my garden, and I genuinely snorted out loud multiple times in front of my neighbors. So, mildly embarrassing, but definitely the funniest thing I've read this year. Question number 11 is your favorite book-to-film adaptation. I have seen no book-to-film adaptations yet this year. I did see Justice League Dark Apocalypse War, which is sort of based on comics, but I think loosely based is the best way you would put that. So if that counts, that wins by default because it's the only one. Question number 13 is your favorite video that you've done this year. I'm not sure. I always have fun doing wrap-ups of things that I read when I traveled, because I've sort of started blending travel vlogs with wrap-up pieces, and I really liked the one that I did that was just boating on the Okavango Delta and then me doing a review on the side. I had fun editing that because I got to relive my little boat trip, so I don't know if that meant whether it was a good video or not. I don't know. Question number 14 is the most beautiful book that you've bought or been gifted this year, and without a doubt the most beautiful book that I've gotten this year is I bought all 3. Indigo was having a sale on all of their DC Comics pieces, including the Vertigo books. So I bought all 3 volumes of The Absolute Preacher. And these, on the slipcase, you have the Glenn Fabry paintings on each side. And then the inside, you've got this hardcover that's designed, look at that. Isn't that fantastic? These are just, I mean, all of the Absolute collections are beautiful, but yeah, it's just such a great quality book. It's not the first of the Absolute editions that I bought, but without a doubt, this is the nicest quality one, I think. These are just great books. And finally, question 15 is, what books do you need to finish by the end of the year? And I always say I don't really need to finish anything. There's no pressure. Technically, I've already hit my Goodreads challenge number, although I will point out that I try to read twice that. I always include a number that doesn't really account for the fact that I read a lot of poetry and comics are just really quick to get through relative to other books. But, I mean, regardless of that, the books that I do need to get through are two that I'm doing group and buddy reads for. I'm currently doing a group read along with a bunch of other booktubers of The Bully Pulpit by Doris Kearns Goodwin, Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, and the Golden Age of Journalism. I'm not super familiar with American history in this period, so that's been really interesting. And I'm also currently buddy reading with Alba from Seriella, Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America by Ibram X. Kendi. We are about halfway through this right now, so I do need to finish it. It's very funny because I'm currently at the point in this book where it's a similar year to the other book, so it's interesting stuff. Yeah, so both of those are interesting reads, and because I am reading them along with other people, I do feel like I need to read those by the end of the year. So definitely for sure though. Alright, since I was not actually tagged, I'm not going to tag anyone else, but if you haven't done this tag, you should, because it's a booktube tradition. Anyway, if you've read any of the books that I talked about and had opposing opinions, I'd love to hear what you thought. Or if you agree with me, that's all good too. Anyway, I hope your half of the year has been good, and yeah, that's it for now. Ciao.